You don't need to come. That's what my daughter told me when I asked what time the ceremony started. Not, we'd love to see you. Not, can you walk me down the aisle? Just a casual, almost apologetic. You don't need to come. 3 hours later, I saw a video of my wife's boyfriend giving a speech at the head table. He called her his daughter. She laughed. They laughed. And I stood in my kitchen, holding a half-wrapped gift box, realizing I had just been erased. The next morning, the bill hit my inbox. Catering, $8,750. Venue cleanup, $1,200. Lighting technician, $400. Custom wine bottles, with Rogan's face on them, $615. Total, $11,965. Due in full. Under my name. My signature. My card on file. I could rewind this story for you. I probably should, but the truth is, it doesn't play like a movie. It's more like 1,000 blurry phone clips. Moments that didn't make sense at the time, but suddenly explain everything when viewed from the end. Like why my wife, Amelia, started calling me just tired lately. Why my daughter, Casey, stopped texting back, except when she needed money. Why our shared family Google Drive suddenly had 24 wedding planning docs, but I couldn't open any of them. I should have paid attention when Amelia changed the Netflix password and forgot to tell me. That was the first door they shut behind me. I wasn't a bad husband. I wasn't a perfect one either. I ironed my own shirts. I made coffee every morning. I was predictable, and I thought that was a good thing. Apparently, it wasn't. Apparently, predictable gets you voted off your own family island. 2 months before the wedding, Amelia told me she was going to stay with her friend Jess in Vermont for a while. I didn't ask questions. She'd been distant for years. I thought maybe space would help. What she meant was, I'm moving in with a yoga instructor named Felix who owns 3 chickens and calls himself a stepdad already. Want to know how I found out? My coworker tagged me in a video on Facebook. It was Felix doing a dumb little dance with Casey, my daughter, at her bridal shower, wearing a t-shirt that said, "Best bonus dad ever." I wasn't in a single picture. Not one. There was a cake. There were speeches. Someone gave a toast and thanked the men who showed up. The room laughed. I didn't crash the wedding. I didn't make a scene. But I did something else. The most insulting thing wasn't that I didn't get a seat. It was that no one even told me I wasn't invited. There was no phone call. No message. Not even one of those fake, overly nice emails with pastel fonts that say regretfully limited space. Nothing. I just disappeared. Quietly. Like I'd been scrubbed from the guest list with a highlighter and a nervous laugh. And still, I kept telling myself there had to be a mistake. Maybe Casey thought I'd be uncomfortable seeing her mother with Felix the fermented kale king. Maybe she assumed I'd sit it out on my own. Maybe she was protecting me. It's insane the kinds of stories your brain creates to protect you from the truth. The truth hit me 5 days before the wedding. I stopped by my old house, the one Amelia and I shared for over 2 decades. I needed to pick up the rest of my tools from the garage. The moment I pulled into the driveway, I saw a white rental van. Guys were unloading white chairs, flower arches, and big glass candle things. A woman with a clipboard was barking orders about table placements. I thought, this can't be here. The wedding isn't here. It's at some vineyard. I saw the pictures. I've been sent the invoices. Except, I looked again at the boxes. They were labeled with my old address. This house, my house, was the venue. Felix stepped out onto the porch, shirtless, wearing linen pants, drinking something green. He looked at me like I was the pizza guy who'd parked too close to the lawn. "Hey, brother," he said. "Didn't know you were stopping by. We're kinda busy here." I stared at him, stunned. "The wedding is here?" He smiled. "Yeah, isn't it beautiful? Casey always loved this place. Said it felt like home. She wanted to bring that into her new beginning." I said nothing. I physically couldn't. My mouth went dry, and the inside of my skull throbbed with heat. I looked past him and saw Amelia carrying folded napkins like this was a backyard brunch, not the final nail in my relationship with my daughter. She didn't say a word to me, didn't even look my way, just walked past and called to Felix. "Baby, did the florist confirm?" Baby. She never called me that. I was always Harv, or hey, can you fix the sink? I turned back to Felix. "So, I'm not invited?" He shrugged like a yoga pose. "It's kind of a vibe thing, man. You know? We're trying to keep the energy soft. You tend to bring more of a concrete energy." Concrete energy. That's what they called 24 years of loyalty and a destroyed spine from working doubles to pay for Casey's orthodontics. I left. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I got in my car and drove back to the studio apartment I now rent above a nail salon. It smells like acetone and regret. I sat on the futon, turned off my phone, and watched the wall for 2 hours. I didn't cry. That came later. I just sat there and listened to the ceiling creak above me as someone got a pedicure. That night, the catering service emailed me the updated meal selection. Thank you for confirming the new dessert vendor, Mr. Finch. Your card will be billed accordingly. Finch. That's Felix's last name. He'd used my name, my email, my credit. I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it tick off every second of the last 25 years I wasted on a family that decided I didn't fit their vibe. And that's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to show up. I wasn't going to pay, but I was going to leave them something they'd never forget. I never meant to find the list. I was just trying to log into my old email to cancel the auto payments linked to the wedding expenses. It was late, probably around 1:30 in the morning. I had half a bowl of cold rice on my lap, sitting on a plastic chair that still had the barcode on the bottom. My phone was cracked, the screen too dim, and everything felt quiet in the kind of way that makes you notice how loud your own thoughts are. I typed in my old Gmail, the one Casey used to send her college essays to for feedback, and after 2 password resets and a short argument with 2-factor authentication, I got in. That's when I saw the shared doc. It was titled simply, Final Guest Notes. It was sitting in the Shared With Me tab, last edited 12 hours earlier. I clicked it without hesitation. I shouldn't have, but I did. Curiosity? Spite. Maybe I was just looking to feel something other than invisible. The document opened to a spreadsheet. Nothing flashy, but the kind of thing that told you someone had spent hours planning every last interaction. Color-coded columns. Notes. Adjustments. Personal energy scores out of 10. Row 23 was me. Name. Harland Doyle. Relation. Biological father. Invited. Reason. Energy disruptive/emotional unpredictability. Backup role. None. Status. Ghost. Do not engage. Ghost. That's what they called me. Not dad. Not father. Not even the guy who paid for her braces. Just ghost. I kept reading. I couldn't stop. Rogan's cousin from Oregon got a personalized vegan option. Brenna's ex-colleague from her HR job got moved to table 2 because he tells great stories. But me? I got deleted before the ceremony even began. The worst part? There was a note next to Felix's name. Felix will walk Casey down the aisle. He's been the steady masculine energy she needed over the years. Steady masculine energy? Are we talking about the man who once got a flat tire and called a psychic before AAA? I closed the laptop. I couldn't look at it anymore. My own family had written me out like a failed plotline, replaced me with a barefoot philosopher who sells artisanal vinegar at farmers markets. But here's what they didn't know. I still had access to more than just old emails. I had the back end of the venue booking. I had the original login to the gift registry. I had the one thing none of them ever thought to change. The password to Casey's childhood iCloud. Why? Because I was the one who set it up when she was 10. I used her favorite stuffed animal and the name of the pizza place where we used to get Friday night slices. She never changed it. And so, for the first time in months, I saw her life in reverse. Old texts, notes, screen recordings of TikToks she never posted. Photos of her and Felix from back when she was still pretending to be single around me. It felt wrong, digging through her digital memories. But tell me, what's the right way to mourn a daughter who buried you while you were still alive? I found an audio note she never sent to anyone. She recorded it a week before the bridal shower. In it, she sounded scared. Not excited. Nervous. Tired. I don't know why this feels wrong. Everyone's so happy. Mom says I should stop overthinking, that I always overthink. Maybe I do. Maybe I'm just scared to become her. Then she stopped talking. The audio ended there. She didn't become her. She became someone else. That's when something inside me cracked. Not like a snap, but like a slow splinter down the center. I closed the laptop, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling of my shoebox apartment. The wedding was in 36 hours. Everyone would be there. Everyone but me. I thought about writing an email. Thought about calling. Thought about begging one last time. But instead, I opened the venue contract. Logged in with the old credentials. scrolled to the Modify Bookings section, and hovered over a little option at the bottom that said, Change Primary Contact/Billing Responsibility. Because if I was a ghost, then I'd haunt them exactly where they'd feel it most. I didn't sabotage the wedding. I want to make that clear. I didn't cut wires or slash tires or burst into the ceremony with a dramatic monologue about betrayal and generational disrespect. That would have been too easy, too theatrical, too cinematic for a man like me. No, what I did was quieter. And worse. The thing about being ignored for long enough is that you start listening in ways no one expects. You notice patterns, passwords, delivery schedules. I knew, for example, that the florist was arriving early to avoid the midday heat. I knew that the lighting technician always needed 2 extra extension cords. I knew that the temporary generator for the outdoor sound system hadn't been fully paid for yet. And I knew exactly which email account the invoice reminders went to. It wasn't Felix's. It wasn't Brenna's. It was still mine. So I didn't ruin the wedding. I just let it unfold naturally without me holding the net beneath it. It started the morning of the ceremony. Bright sun, not a cloud in sight. Brenna must have been giddy, finally getting to host her Pinterest-perfect garden wedding for her golden child, all while her ex sat somewhere silent and broke. Felix probably hummed while setting up his hemp boutonniere. And Casey? I don't know. Maybe she had butterflies. Maybe she was hoping I'd show up after all. But I didn't. I'd already done my part. The tent rental company called me at 7:52 a.m. They were confused. Said the balance hadn't gone through on the card, and they weren't authorized to set up until payment cleared. I told them, calmly, that I was no longer the client of record and gave them Felix's full name and number. They said thank you. That was all. I waited. I watched. I drank my burnt coffee and waited. By 9:15, I received an automated email saying the sound technician had canceled the job due to failure to confirm payment. Another one, half an hour later, from the custom dessert vendor. The gluten-free lemon cakes had been returned to the shop after the delivery driver couldn't get past the gated entrance. Apparently, no one picked up the phone after 5 tries. No instructions. No backup number. The vibe they were curating? It started to unravel like a poorly tied bow tie. A cousin of mine, one of the few I still talk to, sent me a message around noon. It was a photo of the setup. Nothing malicious. Just a wish you were here, man. In the picture, the flower arch was leaning sideways, and 3 people were trying to prop it up with broomsticks. Someone had clearly tried to DIY the lighting cables. There were folding chairs. Folding. At a vineyard. And standing in the background was Felix. No shirt. Just a cream vest. Sweating through it. I saved the picture. Not out of pride. Out of proof that I wasn't crazy for feeling left behind. I spent the rest of the afternoon in silence. I turned my phone off around 2 p.m. Not because I was scared of a call, but because I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of thinking I was waiting. I wasn't. I was sitting on the roof of my apartment, watching the sunset slide behind a used car lot, wondering if they'd remember this day the same way I did. At 8:14 p.m., I turned my phone back on. 1 voicemail. 2 missed texts. The voicemail was from Brenna. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear it unraveling underneath. Harland, I don't know what game you're playing, but you crossed a line. Casey's devastated. Felix is furious. I don't know what you thought this would accomplish, but congratulations, you got your moment. Click. The texts were from Casey. Why? You could have just said no. That second one hit me harder than any accusation ever could. As if I hadn't been saying no quietly for months. As if silence hadn't been the only answer they ever gave me. 1 ignored birthday, 1 missed invitation, 1 invisible seat at a time. I didn't reply, not because I didn't want to, but because anything I said would have been too small. And too late. They still got married, from what I heard. A week later. Different venue. Smaller crowd. Less sparkle. They sent out new photos, staged, airbrushed, edited like an apology. And me? I printed that photo. The one from earlier. The one where the arch leaned and the chairs wobbled and Felix looked sweaty and confused. I framed it. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. Because for the first time in a long time, I looked at that picture and finally saw the truth. They didn't replace me. They just built something shakier without me. And when it started to fall apart, I wasn't there to catch it. Not because I was cruel. Because I was finished. I wasn't looking for anything. Not anymore. I'd already done enough digging, enough obsessing, enough self-punishment disguised as closure. After the wedding collapsed under its own weight, I promised myself I'd stop keeping tabs. I deleted the tracking emails, muted everyone involved, even dropped by my therapist's office for the first time in years, where I talked about boundaries and letting go like I actually meant it. But some things don't stay buried, especially when someone else decides to hand you the shovel. It happened exactly 21 days after the wedding. I remember because I was sitting on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by boxes I never unpacked, trying to figure out if I should throw out an old toaster or bother plugging it in. That's when the mail slipped under the door. Real mail, which I hardly got anymore. One envelope. Handwritten. No return address. The handwriting was shaky. Feminine. Familiar. I opened it. And inside was a letter from Casey. Not a text. Not an email. A real letter. 3 pages, double-sided. Torn edges. Written on stationery I recognized from the guest room drawer back at the house I used to call home. It smelled faintly like lavender, which made me instantly suspicious. Casey wasn't the scented paper type. She was the voice-to-text at a red light kind of person. The letter began softly, almost like she was afraid the page might burn her. Dad, if you're reading this, then I guess I decided to send it after all. I wrote it the night before the wedding, when everything felt wrong, and I didn't know how to say what I needed to say. I'm not even sure I still do, but here it is. The rest of the first page was a confession. Not dramatic, not overly emotional, just raw in a way I hadn't seen from her in years. She wrote about feeling torn, about feeling like she had to choose between peace and guilt, and how her version of peace meant not inviting me, because she thought it would make things simpler. Simpler. That word hit harder than anything else in the whole letter. That's what I was now. Not Dad. Not a broken piece of her history. Just a complication to avoid. But it was the second page that changed everything. She wrote, I don't think I ever stopped being your daughter, even if it looked like I did. But every time Mom told me you were bitter, or stuck, or angry, I started to believe it. I wanted to believe it. Because if I didn't, I'd have to admit that she might have lied. And if she lied about you, what else did she lie about? It turns out, Amelia had been planting things in her mind for years. Whispered rewrites of arguments. Repackaged stories with the roles flipped. All the small moments I thought were neutral or harmless. My distance, my quiet, my frustration with the new you she tried to become. They'd been twisted into evidence of neglect. I was painted as absent. Not physically, but emotionally. And Casey? She believed it. Because she needed to. Because we all believe the version of the story that protects us from confrontation. Page 3 was a full collapse. I think Felix made me feel safe because he didn't know me before everything fell apart. But that's also why I feel empty around him. He doesn't know the real me. You do. You always did. That line, you always did, cracked something open in my chest. I hadn't cried in weeks. Not since the wedding day. But I cried then. The kind of cry that doesn't make noise. The kind that feels like sand being poured out of your soul. The letter ended with a question I still don't know how to answer. If I wanted to talk, really talk, would you pick up the phone? I didn't respond. Not immediately. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and set it on the windowsill next to a dead plant I'd forgotten to water. I stared at it every night for a week. Wondered if it was genuine. Wondered if it was some kind of manipulation, or if it was sincere regret, or just nostalgia playing dress-up. And worst of all, I wondered if I could even handle knowing the truth behind everything she believed about me. The version of me she'd carried for years. Was it so far from the real one? Or had I become part of the lie without realizing it? Maybe I had been bitter. Maybe I'd hardened in the quiet. Maybe I stopped trying long before she stopped hoping. One night, I picked up my phone. Opened her contact. Just stared at it. KC, old number. It said, as if I needed the reminder that nothing stays the same. I didn't call, but I didn't delete the letter either. I just left it there, pressed under a chipped mug, like something still breathing. Because even now, after everything, part of me still wants to believe there's a version of this story where I'm not the ghost. I'm just waiting to be seen again. It was 2:47 in the morning when I finally called her. I hadn't planned to. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't even tired. I was just hollow. One of those nights where silence starts feeling heavier than noise. I'd been staring at the unopened box of my old wedding photos for over an hour. Still couldn't bring myself to throw them out. Couldn't look at them either. They just sat there, accusing me of something I couldn't name. I picked up the phone, tapped her contact, hovered over it. Then, almost without thinking, I hit call. It rang 3 times. Then she answered. Her voice cracked on the first word. Not crying, not yet. Just that breathless tension of someone who'd been waiting to be punched or forgiven and didn't know which one was coming. Dad. It was the first time she'd called me that in over a year. I didn't say anything. My throat locked up. I stared at the window, at the way the moonlight cut across my cluttered desk. I expected guilt, shame, regret. Instead, I felt something stranger, unfamiliarity. She sounded older, sharper, like someone I used to know but now only recognized in pieces. And that scared me more than the silence. I wasn't sure you'd ever, she started, then trailed off. I sat down on the floor, the carpet stiff under my legs, and finally spoke. I got your letter. I didn't think you'd read it. I read it twice. There was a pause, then a brittle laugh. I wrote it 3 times. I don't know what I expected her to say after that. I thought maybe she'd leap into apologies, or start sobbing, or ask about the wedding chaos. Instead, what she said next made me feel like someone had poured cold water down my spine. Felix read the letter before I sent it. That threw me off. What? I didn't mean to show him. But he asked what I was writing and I didn't lie. I let him read it. And he said I was inviting a ghost into our lives. That once someone leaves, you can't just resurrect the past without consequences. I stayed quiet. Because honestly, he wasn't entirely wrong. But he also wasn't the one who'd spent 22 years walking her to school, or teaching her how to parallel park, or holding her when she had night terrors after that one house fire dream that haunted her through middle school. That was me. Not a smoothie-guzzling guru who thought sage could fix abandonment. He told me, she went on, that if I called you, I had to be prepared for you to say nothing. Or worse, to say the truth. And what truth is that? I asked. That maybe I wasn't worth fighting for. I felt that one in my gut. Not because it was true, but because it used to be. Not always. Not deeply. But in those worst, lowest moments when I saw her siding with Brenna and cutting me out in silence, I'd wondered if she was gone for good. I'd convinced myself it would be easier if I stopped hoping. Now, hearing her say that out loud, I hated myself for ever thinking it. You were worth everything, I said, before I even realized the words had left me. Then came the crying. Not dramatic, just soft and painful. The kind that sounds like someone exhaling years of guilt through a clogged throat. I didn't interrupt. I let her break down. And in that moment, I stopped being angry. I wasn't healed. I wasn't over it. But I wasn't angry. When she finally spoke again, her voice was a whisper. Can I ask you something real? Yeah. Did you do it? That question, right there, was a landmine. I knew exactly what she meant. The wedding. The collapse. The unpaid bills. The vanishing tent. The cake that never came. The sound system that went dead halfway through the vows. She didn't ask with blame in her voice. Just curiosity. As if she needed to know whether I had pulled the lever or whether the wreckage was always going to happen no matter what. I took a long breath. I didn't ruin anything, I said. I just stopped fixing what I didn't break. She was quiet again. Then she said something I didn't expect. I wish you had shown up anyway. And that's when I almost lost it. Why? To watch Felix pretend he raised you? To stand next to folding chairs and pretend I wasn't erased? No, she said gently. To remind me what real looked like. That line lodged in my chest like a stone. Not because it was poetic, but because it was honest. The man she married was charming, well-spoken, present, but not real, not in the way dads are real. The kind of real that breaks his back to fix a garage door, that forgets anniversaries but shows up for science fairs, that buys the wrong shampoo but remembers every nightlight you ever used. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat there, in the dark, letting her words sit heavy between us. She asked me if we could meet. Just coffee. No pressure. No second chances. Just a conversation. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I just told her to write me another letter. A real one. Unfiltered. No edits. No lavender perfume. I wanted her truth. Not a performance. She agreed. And when we hung up, I realized something strange. For the first time in over a year, I wasn't angry at her anymore. I was angry at myself for how long it took me to tell her the truth. I chose a quiet place, somewhere she wouldn't recognize. A small coffee shop on the edge of town, the kind that always smells like burned beans and furniture polish, with cracked tiles near the register and a napkin dispenser that's always jammed. I picked that spot on purpose. I didn't want to meet her somewhere curated, somewhere polished and Instagram ready. I wanted somewhere real, somewhere with bad lighting and no Wi-Fi, somewhere people came when they didn't want to be seen, but needed to be heard. She was already sitting when I arrived. Table by the window, hands folded, one of those oversized scarves wrapped around her neck, even though it wasn't cold. That was her mother's influence. Brenna always dressed like she was going to bump into an ex she needed to outshine. Casey looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just softer. Like something in her armor had cracked, and she hadn't decided yet whether she'd fix it or let it fall apart. When she looked up and saw me, she didn't smile. But she didn't look away either. That was enough. I ordered a black coffee. No cream. No sugar. Sat across from her. For a few seconds, we both just listened to the espresso machine hiss and the cash drawer clink and the couple behind us arguing softly about splitting a muffin. Finally, she spoke. I almost didn't come. I nodded. Same. She looked down at her hands. Fidgeted with a ring I'd never seen before, probably new. Probably a gift. Probably from him. I wrote the letter, she said, but I left a lot out. I waited. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded paper. Not neat. Not crisp. Just clearly read and reread and crumpled and flattened and second-guessed. I wrote this the night before the wedding too, she said. But I didn't send it. I wasn't brave enough. I took it from her hand. It felt warm, like it had been sitting there for a while. Like she'd been debating whether to give it to me the entire time she was waiting. I opened it slowly, expecting another apology, another breadcrumb trail of regrets. But it wasn't that. It was a list. Names. Dates. Quotes. Things her mother had said. Things I'd supposedly said or done, none of which had ever happened. Dad yelled at me in front of my friends. 2016. Said he was ashamed of me when I dropped pre-med. 2019. Refused to come to graduation because of Felix. 2021. All lies. All planted. She'd started collecting them 2 months before the wedding, after a conversation with a family friend, someone who'd told her that I never missed graduation. That I'd sat in the very back, alone, because my ticket got lost in the mail. She started asking questions. Started poking holes. Brenna had told her I forgot to send birthday flowers last year. But when she checked the receipt, she saw I'd paid extra for same-day delivery, and that the card had been removed from the order. Removed. By someone who didn't want her to know I remembered. Casey looked up at me, eyes wide, but not teary. Not now. I don't know why she did it, she said. I did. Control. Brenna was always good at rebranding herself as the victim in every chapter. Every fight we ever had ended with her somehow in tears, and me apologizing for something I couldn't remember doing. She'd mastered the art of gentle poisoning. Not the kind that kills, but the kind that weakens you just enough so that you forget what strength ever felt like. I folded the list and placed it in my pocket. I don't hate her, Casey said suddenly. I just don't know who she is anymore. I stirred my coffee, even though there was nothing in it. I think she's always been who she is, I said. You're just finally seeing it without the makeup. We sat there in silence again. And then she said something I hadn't expected. I don't think I want to stay married. That stopped me cold. I looked at her. You mean to Felix? She nodded, eyes now fixed on the window. He was what I needed when I didn't know who to believe. He gave me answers. Certainty. But I think he liked me better confused. I didn't say anything. She continued. He's not a bad man. But he's not who I thought he was either. And I don't think I can keep pretending I'm someone I'm not just to make him feel like the hero. I wanted to tell her something profound. Something fatherly. Something like, it's never too late to start over. Or you deserve someone who sees the whole you. But I didn't. I'd said too many things too late already. So instead, I just said, what now? She smiled. Not big. Not dramatic. Just enough to feel like a crack in the storm cloud. I think I'll start by being your daughter again. One letter at a time. We finished our coffee in silence. She didn't hug me when we left. No big scene. No music swell. But she touched my hand as we walked to the parking lot. And I swear, in that tiny, fleeting moment, I didn't feel like a ghost anymore. It didn't happen overnight. Nothing real ever does. There were no sweeping apologies, no movie-ending dinner where everyone laughed and forgave each other. But maybe that's what made it work. Maybe we were finally done pretending things hadn't been broken, and instead, We started building from the pieces we still had. Casey started writing again. Not letters this time, but emails. Long ones. The kind you have to scroll to read. Sometimes she'd attach old photos of the lake trips, the backyard tent nights, the Halloween we both dressed as pirates because she couldn't decide who got to wear the eye patch. She never mentioned Felix again. Not directly. But I knew from the quiet that it was over. Not with fireworks or betrayal. Just a slow, mutual unraveling. She moved into her own place. A tiny apartment above a record store with terrible parking and stained ceilings. But she said it felt like hers. For the first time in years, she wanted space that didn't come with someone else's expectations built into the walls. We met every other Sunday after that. Same coffee shop. She'd get chai. I'd stick with black. We didn't always talk about the past. Sometimes we just argued about movies, or politics, or why she still liked pineapple on pizza. Sometimes she'd bring a book she was reading and slide it across the table and say, "This reminded me of us." Each visit chipped away at the distance that had calcified between us. And one day, without planning it, she called me Dad in passing, like she never stopped. A few months later, I got a package in the mail. No note. No sender name. Just a simple white box. Inside was a framed photograph. A real one. Matte print. Heavy paper. It was of us. From when she was 6. I was lifting her up into the air, both of us mid-laugh, sun behind us. A moment I didn't even remember being photographed. But it was real. Tangible. Proof that for a while, maybe for the most important while, I had been the center of her world. Taped to the back was a single line, written in her handwriting. "You didn't fail. I just forgot the whole story." As for Brenna, I don't hate her anymore either. I thought I did. But hate is a weight you carry long after the person you're angry at has stopped feeling it. She reached out once. A short, clipped message about hoping we could all move forward. I didn't reply, not out of malice, but because moving forward didn't require her anymore. Felix? He disappeared the way I always knew he would. One retreat too far, one mantra too flexible. Last I heard, he was leading a mindful fasting workshop in Colorado. Sounds about right. Casey invited me over for her birthday this year. Nothing big, just a few friends, some music, candles. She made lasagna from scratch, burned the top a little, but I didn't say anything. When she handed me a slice, she said, "This one's extra crispy, just how you never liked it." I laughed. She laughed too. And that night, before I left, she hugged me. Tight. The kind of hug that makes time collapse a little. The kind that says you're still mine, even if we both got lost for a while. No, I didn't get my old life back. That life's gone, boxed up in memories, in photo albums, in mistakes I can't undo. But I got something better. I got a daughter who chose to come back. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because she remembered who we were and decided it was worth saving. And I stopped being a ghost. I started being a father again.